I'm reading tonight one verse from the 13th chapter of the book of Hebrews. I'm going to ask you tonight if you feel you must leave to do so now. I'm going to ask you not to move around in this tent. I'm going to ask the teenagers not to talk and whisper.
Amen.
I'm going to ask the children not to play. I'm going to ask you to remain seated and be reverent as though you were in the Holy of Holies. One simple verse. Wherefore Jesus also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered without the gate. The two words that I am going to use tonight for a text are the words, Jesus suffered. He was 33 years of age, no father on earth, no mother in heaven. The drama that I am about to diagram for you was born in the heart of God in a distant eternity.
Amen.
Always there was a cross in his heart. He was indeed the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world.
Yes.
As the old black preacher said when Jesus was preaching as a boy of 12, and they say to him, "Boy, how old is you?" He said, "On my mother's side I'm 12. On my father's side I'm the Ancient of Days." When he entered the coast of Caesarea Philippi, he was only 6 months away from the cross. However, when he came over the hill from Bethany and down the long, narrow defile toward the eastern gate, the cross lay heavy upon his path. He paused that day to look at the city that meant so much to the culture of his people and their faith. Its street had been trodden by the feet of angels. The declivity of those ancient hills slept their kings and prophets. And soon the people would come forth to meet him, but now for some strange reason, like an awesome law before the storm, he pauses. And he cries out, "O Jerusalem, how oft would I have gathered you as a hen gathereth her brood, and you would not." And then he wept. What would make the face of the Son of God to be wet with tears? Would he be afraid of the forces of nature, of mankind that might be arrayed against him? Certainly not, for he was the omnipotent God. Why then would he weep? His omniscience surprised him that out in the distant tomorrows he could hear the thundering chariot wheels of the Roman soldiers led by Titus Vespasian. He knew they would come against Jerusalem and plunder the city, and Jews by the thousands would die upon crosses. He knew that somehow they had let pass forever the moment of their peace. And there is that picture of him weeping. Down the narrow road he would walk. The great multitudes, many of them admirers, other of them curious people, would lay their garments in his way and wave their palm branches and would say, "Hosanna, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord." In a few days, some of them who had hailed him would be ready to nail him. But today they wanted to erect a throne and crown him king. He moved on into the city through the eastern gate, where there occurred what is referred to by theologians as Passion Week, recorded by all of the gospel writers, most precisely John in his gospel. There came that hour when at last he could delay it no longer. He gathered with his disciples in an upper room, and there he shared with them for the last time the breaking of bread. Strange things would happen that night. There would be, of course, the suggestion of betrayal. it would be difficult for them to accept that fact, that any of them could possibly betray him. There would be the washing of their feet to show them in their discussions of who was to be greatest, that he who was really the greatest was servant of all. Soon they would testify. The big fisherman would rise to say, I do not know who it is that will betray you, but it is not me. Not I. I will go with you to prison, and if that is not far enough, I will go with you even to death. And Jesus said, sit down, Simon. Before the night shall pass and the rooster shall crow, you will 3 times have denied me. Like a fist in the solar plexus, the big fisherman would sit back, unbelieving, nonplussed. It could not be so. And yet somehow the Galilean was always right. Then Judas, with a hiss of a serpent in his name, would rise to leave, and for one brief moment he would be silhouetted against a night that would know no morning. They would sing a hymn, and then together they would file down the steps and into the streets of Jerusalem. From Mount Zion they would come until eventually they would reach again the eastern gate, down into the gorge called the Valley of Kidron, its waters flowing out and down to the great salt sea. Across the brook and up on the side of the hill, a little grove of olive trees. There Jesus would fling himself across the protrusion of a rock, and he would wrestle with forces invisible to human eyes until the roots of his emotions would put forth their crimson tears. Suddenly, there is a commotion at the eastern gate of the city. They come with hands upon the hilts of their swords, close-in fighting weapons, tested in all of the battles behind which they have marched behind hedges of Roman iron to raise the standard of Rome across the civilized world. They surely would not now be stopped by a band of peasant preachers. In their hands, like giant fireflies in the night, the flickering light of torches as they moved on to the arrest. And so the Gospels record that as they approached that holy place where Jesus wrestled with God in prayer, Judas would place a kiss upon his face to mark him as the Messiah. Peter would step forth with a little band of steel and tangle with the greatest legionnaires in the world. Jesus would say to him, fisherman, put up your sword. You're fighting with a wrong weapon. Someday you will write your name in letters of fire across the empire of Rome, but you will be fighting with a different weapon than that. They would dig their strong fingers into the soft flesh of his body, and they would drive him like an animal to the slaughter. He would be taken from the Garden of Gethsemane under the protection of the Roman soldiers, down again into the valley and up the bank on the other side, into the eastern gate, and thus would begin the saga of Calvary. The first experience of Jesus would be what might be termed the justice of the peace hearing, a kind of a kangaroo court of an affair, in which he would stand before Annas, father-in-law of Caiaphas, who represented the Jewish people. There would be a brief hearing, but there would be no resolution of the matter. Soon the court scene would shift from the house of Annas to the court of Caiaphas, the great high priest of the Jews. The Sanhedrin of the highest governing body of Israel, the supreme court of the people, would set in judgment upon his case. But it would be left to Caiaphas to suggest, first of all, that Jesus be put to death for the crime of blasphemy, declaring himself to be the Son of God.